Hey everybody, hope and pray that you're doing well. Today as we come to our word from the Word. And today that word is trouble. Trouble. And I used to always love to play that game, Trouble. But in life, it acts a whole lot like that. It seems like we keep dancing around trouble. And every time we maybe take a step forward, we end up taking a couple steps backwards. And then somebody else knocks us out of the game. And a lot of times it's because of the things we've done to ourselves to get ourselves in trouble. Now, we kind of see that a little bit in Judges 11 today, but in the passage we're going to look at, talking about Jephthah, it's when he has been expelled from his home because they've cast him out. He's unwanted because he's the son of a prostitute. And so they look down on him and they just kick him out, and he goes on to live in a different place. And then he ends up hanging out with some other kind of rough characters as well. And then all of a sudden, Israel gets in trouble, and there's things going on, and like, man, they need some help because now the Ammonites are coming against them, and what are they going to do? They need a warrior, and they can't find one, and so they go and find Jephthah, and that's who they want to be their warrior. And now think about this. That ought to show us a little bit about the character of this man. And then even though they expelled him, going against God's law that said to love your neighbor, and yet they expel him and they outcast or cast him out, yet here he is, they're going to call on him. So let's look and hear what they say, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about the story. Judges chapter 11, verses 7 through 11 today. So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Did you not hate me and expel me from my father's house? Why have you come to me now when you were in distress?" And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "That is why we have turned again to you now, that you may go with us and fight against the people of Ammon, and be our head over all inhabitants of Gilead." So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "If you take me back home to fight against the people of Ammon, and the Lord delivers them to me, shall I be your head?" And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "The Lord will be a witness between us if we do not do according to your words." Then Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and commander over them. And Jephthah spoke all his words before the Lord in Mizpah. Now, that last part, they kind of made it official. They kind of, before the Lord at Mizpah, they say these same things. And, hey, this is what we're going to do. Jephthah says what he's going to do. The elders say what they're going to do. Hey, we'll make you head if the Lord gives victory. Now, remember, if you compare chapter 10 and chapter 11, you'll see that, God had been cast out, right? They didn't want his ruling over them because they wanted to call after all these other gods. And then all of a sudden, when they get in trouble, they call out to God. Well, now here you see in Jephthah's case, it's the same thing. They say, okay, well, because remember, God's not going to deliver them. We talked about that yesterday. And so he says, well, look, Jephthah has been sent out, and now he's cast out. And yet now when there's trouble brewing, now they want his help. Now, I know if you've ever been in that situation, I've been in that situation before, where maybe somebody didn't want help from you, and then all of a sudden they don't have any choice but to ask you for help. It's really tempting to just say, nope. You can just go on your merry way because you had your opportunity. Now, Jephthah didn't do that, but I love the fact that he says, look, I'll go back, but if the Lord allows us to win, right? If the Lord gives me the victory, in other words, I know that he's with this and he's for this and he's going to guide me to the right place. So he's pointing right back to the Lord. And I was reading one commentator that said that Jephthah actually talks about and calls the name of Yahweh more than any of the other judges that we see as it's written. It's interesting because after the Lord gives him victory, he makes before the victory, he makes a really dumb vow. And you can see that as you read on. And his vow is, well, Lord, if you give me the victory, then, hey, I'll just sacrifice anything. The first thing that comes out of my house when I get back home after the victory, I'll sacrifice to you. And it ends up being his only daughter that walks out. And there again, you read through the story and you'll find he has victory and then he has defeat. Victory and failure. Gideon, remember, he had great victory and then failure. And Samson, when we get to him, he had great victory and failure. And so we see this cycle even among the judges, that now they're not necessarily living as evil as the people around them are, but they still make mistakes. Now, that's a great point for us all to recognize that they're still human. But you notice that the times that they can do supernatural things is when the Spirit of God came upon them. When the Spirit of God empowered them to do wonderful things. Now, Jephthah, as you go through the story, Jephthah, instead of just going right out immediately to battle, I mean, he's known for being a good warrior, but he actually ends up talking to the king of Ammon, and he's kind of trying to talk things out, and honestly gives one of the most rational conversations about why the Ammonites had no claim to the land. I mean, he gives reasons of why, because Israel, even as they were marching around, they had been around it. They weren't allowed to even pass through. And then, it wasn't until the Amorites came against them that they actually attacked them and got it. And then even then he said, look, it's been this way for 300 years. Why are you all of a sudden today deciding that you're going to come against me and come against our people? And so it's very rational thought. So I would say his rationale with the king of Ammon is wonderful. His victory that he has and his attitude towards God is wonderful and beautiful. But the vow that he makes later is stupid. It wasn't required. He got himself into trouble. And just as he was claiming that these people had cast him out and only called for him in times of trouble, if we're not careful with our own words, we'll get ourselves into trouble. Now, we all know you have the expression of putting your foot in your mouth. And I bet you've done it, and I know I've done it. We have to be careful with the words that we say. And as I said, you need to read the whole chapter so you can see the vow and see how all of this goes together in context. But, we can really align our hearts with where Jephthah was, thinking, hey, you cast me out and now you want my help. How do you think God feels when we only cry out to him when we're in trouble? Wouldn't we do just as good to enjoy his presence in the good times as well as in the bad? It's the same thing that Jephthah's family could have done with him, accepted him into the family and left him in place in the good times so that when trouble came, he was already there. I know we've talked about a whole lot today, and we've kind of jumped back and forth throughout the chapter. But I guess today, if I had to leave you with one thought, it would be this. Do you cry out to God only when you're in trouble? God bless you. And I pray you have a great, great day.